Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Kristy Houtman. I am the Global SVP for Circus Street of Strategy and Growth. We are a training company. With me, I have Nathan Baynard, who is the Vice President, Global Brand Marketing for Barbie and the dolls portfolio of Mattel. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. That picture is from long ago.
Mine.
Yeah.
So before we get started, just so you know, Nathan has said there is no topic of conversation off the table. So get your questions ready.
Yes,
he'll answer
for sure.
them. Or he'll do well not to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nathan, we have heard a lot of current themes coming across in the audience and obviously the panelists that we've had recently over the last couple of days. And the things that we're hearing are around brand authenticity. We're hearing things about, data and metrics. We're hearing about being experiential.
Yeah.
And we're hearing about being brave. So testing and learning. And Matt from J&J yesterday said, if you're going to do tests, don't do 20 grand and think you're going to get some good insights. Right?
Yes.
So make sure you be brave, be okay to fail, and make some exciting things. So when we first met, you started telling me about your business and how it's changed. And it used to be very seasonal. So in Q4, you were doing all of your sales, and now it's almost like a full year business.
Yeah.
So in light of how you talk to your customers and managing a brand portfolio, what are the significant changes that you've had to make?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone who's lived through the last couple of years as marketers or people have obviously experienced these radical shifts in what's going on in culture. And obviously, the pandemic impacted different sectors in a variety of different ways. And for toys, it was this big shift in just, consumers' openness to engaging in our category in a much deeper way because everyone was stuck at home. And I don't know who here has kids, but everyone was looking for entertainment opportunities. And after I've got two boys, they're 4 and 5. After you sort of handed the iPad over for however long it was going to be, at some point you were like, maybe this isn't so great. And I think people really started to turn to toys as an interesting alternative that has some deeper benefits to it, that is more creativity focused and imagination focused and all of that stuff. And so I think we started to see a natural upswell in the business for that reason. But then also what we also saw was that parents and shoppers started playing a much stronger role in purchases than traditionally. The old adage in toys was you get kids and you win. So you spent all of your dollars winning with kids, being cool to kids and all of that stuff. And you really didn't advertise to parents. And what we saw during the pandemic was, brands that had a relationship with parents and shoppers that were multi-generational, that had that history, that's naturally where you started to see some uplift. And then the other dynamic we saw was that, bigger ticket items like the Barbie Dream House, it's $200, $250. Normally that's a Q4 purchase, that's a holiday purchase. And all of a sudden during the pandemic, that was like, it's Tuesday, I need something to entertain my kids. So I'm gonna drop $250 on a Dream House. So that pretty radically shifted how we thought about our advertising strategy and what kind of mix of products and price points were resonating, ultimately created a pretty big shift in how we approach. So an item that normally we would advertise really heavily in the final few weeks of the year became something that we decided to turn on all year. And that was a pretty radical shift, at least to us. And I mean, that was already, one of the top items in the industry, but, the numbers that we saw happening over the last couple of years were just pretty remarkable. And I think, again, to your point around having to bet, I mean, that was betting with pretty big spends in response to what we were seeing as a natural sort of consumer reaction going on in the industry. So I think we're also seeing now sort of what is post-pandemic and what does that start to shift back to? Because I think, we got into this kind of very natural upswing, and now we're seeing that start to right set a little bit, and people are obviously out and about and in the world. I'm still a little like, whoa, I'm at South by Southwest and there's all these people around, which still feels a little bit new to me, but I think everyone's, kind of starting to get over the hump and starting to obviously spend their dollars in different places, which also means we have to react and think about what does that mean for our core business, and then how do we extend into different places and spaces to capture that opportunity.
So, great next question.
Yeah.
The obviously extending your brand and being able to flex to make sure that you are meeting those consumers at the point now where they're out and about.
Yeah.
What type of things are you doing across the portfolio to maximize that opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about the pandemic was actually, I thought it was, I don't know how everybody else experienced it, but I think we were reacting so much real-time to real-time data and insights to try to just figure out how the heck do we respond to what's going out in the marketplace. But at the same time, I thought it was also on bigger businesses that weren't at risk in the midst of that. It was actually a really interesting time to invest in creativity and R&D. So I actually think that we're now seeing the benefit, a lot of intense creative time that a lot of teams got to spend during the pandemic, and that we're seeing the fruits of that kind of coming into post-pandemic. So we went into a lot of R&D on a lot of experiential kind of efforts on the brand, and we're now getting those out into market in a big way. And all of that pipelining that we did during the pandemic is now able to pay off at a time where now consumers are really interested in those kinds of experiences, et cetera. And then, I mean, I think we're also, on Barbie specifically, I think we're always looking to extend the brand into whatever the new place and space is. So whether that's the metaverse or, launching a theatrical movie with Margot Robbie or whatever, right? Like, we're always pipelining those new opportunities. And I think because we've been on this sort of great journey, I mean, you go back to the comment around, I know the panel before was talking about brand authenticity. We've been on this amazing journey on the brand over the last, 7 or 8 years, where we've really rallied around a really key and central purpose, which is to inspire the limitless potential in every girl. And I think we've done the work, and we now have the receipts as a brand where we've shown up in a really meaningful way to this latest consumer set, which only gives us more permission to expand and extend into all of these different verticals, these different audiences and adjacent audiences, and honestly gets creators like Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie interested in wanting to partner with us, and attaching that level of talent to these kinds of executions just only further ensures likely success as we extend into places that we've never been before.
And I mean, one of the things we were talking about was that for International Women's Day, you've had, you were here earlier this week and you hosted a dinner.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through a little bit about the Gap project and Barbie, and this is another reason, and how you're extending the brand in such a meaningful way?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started a shared social mission called the Dream Gap Project. And I just have to acknowledge Matt Rapicki, who is my old boss who's sitting here and helped me start that project and was the originator of the idea 5 years ago. But I think off the backs of a lot of the evolution work that we did on the brand starting in 2015, we saw this positive upswell in the business, and that only kind of emboldened the team to take on things that I think the brand hadn't really had permission to do before, which was to really think about a deeper impact that we could make. And so back in 2017, 2018, there was a set of research that got surfaced to us out of NYU by a man named Andre Simpian that basically shows that at the age of 5, boys and girls have equal belief in their own gender. So you test girls and boys at 5, you ask them questions about a generic person, and they equally believe in their own gender being brilliant, the possibilities of what they can be, all of those things. At 6, you test them again, there's a 35% drop-off in girls. So that obviously kind of flies in the face of what we had established as, this sort of newly clarified purpose for the brand. And so we created this shared social mission. We dubbed it the Dream Gap Project, talking about that sort of gap in confidence, and started going on a journey with a whole variety of partners and activations to close it. So we've commissioned new research, because this space is radically underfunded and underdeveloped. If you look at sort of gender differences and looking at those age categories, there's just not a lot of funding for it. So we commissioned follow studies. We funded amazing postdoc in Andre's department. Her name is Andrea Vial, who did a follow study that just actually released last year that talked about some of the reasoning behind what's going on with the gap. So she specifically looked at that one of the main factors that's going on is sort of the social backlash that girls anticipate when they step into leadership roles is part of what's causing them to resist stepping into those roles. So, that's one way we can sort of commit our resources as a brand to, again, fund and understand this phenomena in a deeper way. We co-developed curriculum with UCLA, which is part of why we were here at South by EDU last week and talking about that work. So we developed curriculum in partnership with a local elementary school. We've now tested that in a variety of after-school programs, and really it's about building social emotional learning skills, resilience, growth mindset, et cetera, for boys and girls to ultimately try to impact the phenomenon. And then we have a whole host of other things. Obviously, we release inspiring products. We timed International Women's Day every year. We honor a set of real-life female role models. We've been doing this for the last several years. We've honored upwards of almost 200 women at this point. And this year we focused on STEM as a sort of vertical to theme the women around this year. And so we honored 7 women from around the world. 3 of them in the US were the Wachowski sisters. So Susan Wachowski, who was the CEO of YouTube, Anne Wachowski, who was here doing the dinner with me, who's the CEO and co-founder of 23andMe. And then their sister Janet, who isn't the most public one, but it's literally this amazing trio of women. She's like an anthropology professor at, I can't remember which university off the top of my head, but these 3 amazing sisters. And so we got to hear about their upbringing and, what does it take to build an environment where these 3 children all went on to do these 3 women went on to do all of these amazing things. So I think we create platforms to tell those stories. We use International Women's Day as a natural moment to do that. But, we believe bringing more role models out, more female role models, is a critical piece of closing the gap and showing girls that they can be anything, and boys that women can be anything.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah. Love that. Thank you. I hate it how they're so overachieving. It's really annoying. I saw when we were talking about the Barbie movie, there was a little bit of a
Yes.
And I can't not talk about it. So obviously that's a souped up, experiential brand extension.
Yeah.
What is it going to? It's July?
July 21st.
July 21st.
Yes, mark your calendars. Yeah.
So talk to me about the process that went through, how you're going to amplify that, what type of things you're going to do around explore that a bit.
Yes, I will say the things that I can say.
I know.
But yeah, I can certainly talk about the process, which I think is, literally the process has been 20 years in the making. They've been talking about making a live action movie of Barbie. I've been on the brand for 12 years, and there have been multiple failed attempts before this. This process started, I think, 3.5 years ago. Greta came in. I gave her an immersion on the brand. We had a good conversation with her and a couple of the other leaders on the brand. And I think from the very beginning why we got so, we're excited about Greta because she sends a very specific signal about what this film is going to be and what it's not going to be, and specifically that it's not going to be the movie that you expect. She's not a, big budget, light and flight kind of movie. She's going to create something that has a point of view and something to say. And I think that is something that we're very interested in from a brand point of view, but also from a corporate point of view. So we started a Mattel Films division a few years ago. Our CEO, Anand Kreis, very much comes from the entertainment industry and believes in the power of IP, but also believes you've got to find the right creators to unlock brands in the right way to translate into something that's going to be meaningful and actually resonate, right? But it was clear from the first meeting, Greta had a deep passion for the brand. She was excited to get in the weeds. There's a lot of history. This brand's 64 years old. So she wanted to get in it. She wanted to see some of the archives of the original product, some of these amazing early fan letters that we have from when Barbie first launched 60 years ago. You know what I mean? So
some of the fashion partnerships.
Yes, for sure. I think we had a really good conversation about striking a balance between serving the fans that we knew we wanted to honor and make sure that there were elements that resonated, and we also wanted to make sure that the movie was reflective of where the brand was today. But then we also knew that we had to subvert expectations, so had good conversations about how far is too far, where are places and spaces that felt comfortable, all that stuff. Anyway, so it's obviously been a journey to get to the point that the movie's just about done. It's crazy to think about a brand that's been 64 years old, that's been the #1 toy in the industry for many of those 64 years. It's a huge brand, but it's crazy to think that this year will be the biggest advertising spend the brand has ever seen. So that is an interesting thing to wrap your head around as a marketer and as someone who's driving a massive global brand, to think about this thing, which is not the brand, right? I mean, the way we think about this is Greta's interpretation of the brand, right? Just as we collaborate with myriad amazing fashion designers to do collabs with us, right? This is our collab with Greta. So it is an interesting thing to think about, okay, it's gonna be this massive cultural moment. How do we complement that? And how do we think about also what comes after it? That's a lot of the work I'm doing right now.
Can you tell us what comes after it?
Well, the brand is going to celebrate its 65th anniversary in 2024, and we've got a lot of exciting things that we're cooking up. Nothing that I can actually talk about, but it's a lot of cool stuff. I mean, and obviously, the really amazing thing about what this film offers us is it's going to extend our audience base in a way that we haven't seen, I think, ever on the brand. You know, the movie we expect to be PG-13, and we expect adults and teens and tweens to go. People that are not, for the most part, on a broad level, engaging with the brand in a deep way right now. So that is a huge opportunity for us from a business perspective and a marketing perspective to think about how do we capture that new engagement and deliver new products, experiences, marketing that's going to build off of that. So that's a lot of what we're talking about.
What type of things do you expect to see? And how are you going to pivot when you see them?
I mean, I think I'm expecting to see just what we've seen already, like 200-fold. You know, we dropped one image in April last year, and I feel like it broke the internet. And it's like every time we drop a piece, it's, you know, just this amazing moment of conversation and love and nostalgia for what the brand has been. So I think it's just about thinking about how can we build off of that, as opposed to sort of fall off of it. You know what I mean? But I think it's been interesting to go on the journey with Warner Brothers, who literally is like, continues, I think, to even be surprised themselves at just how much engagement there is with the film already. So it's this very much this balance of also not showing too much too soon and making people sick of the movie before it even comes out, which is also an interesting marketing challenge. Yeah.
So we've spoken a fair bit about Barbie, but you are obviously across your whole dolls portfolio. How do you manage, given that Barbie is such a big part of that portfolio right now, and obviously would be taking a fair bit of your attention, how do you make sure that the rest of the portfolio and how you manage them is not overwhelming the customer, so that you're not obviously going out with 1,000 different messages to the same people, which obviously is not ideal. How are you handling that, and what type of challenges do you see across your organization at the moment?
So about 4.5 years ago, we switched from a branded structure at the company to a category structure. So we're separated into dolls, vehicles, infant preschool, basically, to be more aligned, honestly, with the commercial process. And obviously, so much of our commerce is done through third-party retail, and so ensuring that how we're building our strategies and thinking through our overall business management is done through that category lens. So yes, it meant I went from having one brand to having anywhere from 10 to 15 at a time, depending on the season, and it's a mixture of brands that we own, like Barbie and Monster High and Polly Pocket and things like that, and then brands that we license in. So we just recently got the Disney Princess and Frozen licenses back to do their fashion dolls. So it is a ever complicated process of ensuring that we're maximizing the business, right? And that happens in a few different ways. There's obviously sort of retail specific challenges and making sure that we're using any new offering to get us new space at retail to go after our competition. But I think we very much, when we're going after properties that are out there that we're trying to license in, or when we're developing new ground up IP or bringing back IP in our vault like Monster High, we've got to believe that there's a white space in the market for it, or else why are we bringing it out? It's just going to cannibalize the rest of the business. But then from a marketing point of view, it does become about portfolio and calendar management. How do we give clean lanes and windows for different initiatives to live? And then also, thinking through obviously media strategy and all of that, right? So I think it's It's complicated, but it's fun, and I really enjoy it. I think the portfolio piece of it is really interesting, and it's been really rewarding to relaunch Monster High. It's a totally different brand that had a very specific moment and has D&I at the heart of it, and thinking about reimagining a set of characters and content in partnership with Nickelodeon has been a really cool process to go through, and so far resonating. So, yeah.
What would be the biggest challenge that you've seen in your tenure as the ownership of all that portfolio that right now that you're seeing, and how do you address that? Like, what type of things do you need to make sure that you're on top of?
I think it is the complexity, honestly. We're a big organization, right? We're in 150 markets around the world, and that's an amazing competitive advantage for us when we talk about the industry, but it also creates complexity. So I think creating consistent alignment around prioritization, making sure, I've got regional marketing teams in every region around the world, making sure that we're very clear on what we're going after and where we're kind of making sure that our investments are synced, I think is a really critical piece right now as our portfolio has really expanded in a really significant way. So I think like that's a really key piece of it that I think we've been working hard on. Like, how do you create those very clear guidances on prioritization? It sounds simple, it's not. So I would say that's probably the biggest challenge.
And obviously it's such a, as you said, when you go out to regions, they get to execute on their own turf, knowing what their customers need to see. How do you keep your team upskilled? How do you keep them understanding what you need, what the industry is doing from a overarching point of view, but then allowing them to have that individual execution mechanism?
Yeah, I mean, I think listen, I don't think there's any perfect scenario, and I think the challenge that that I continue to feel like is we get a lot of data and we don't get a lot of insights. And I think, especially for the younger members of my team, I think they start drowning in all the data, right? And so I think taking the time, I think we try to use our team connects to really check in on like, what's going on, what are we hearing, do we think that's meaningful? Because I think the interesting thing, especially for a team, like, especially my Barbie team that's actually relatively new and wasn't part of sort of the turnaround journey, I think they're always looking for that new data is coming in every week, and that's a big thing. We're still acting on some insights that we got 6 years ago that are still really relevant to some of the choices that we make. So I think you've got to also be really clear about when an insight is actually really meaningful and when it's more of the moment. You know what I mean? I think being able to make those judgment calls is something that I think we have more and more conversations about. But then I think, listen, we have a learning agenda across every season, and across different markets to understand, what tests are being run from a media perspective. And then we have a relatively decent mechanism for sharing that around and ensuring that we're creating, again, alignment around how are we thinking about, the quote unquote playbook, because at this scale, you've got so many different marketers working across so many different brands. You do need to have a little bit of a foundational playbook that you're operating on while still allowing the space and place to be innovative and to be leading or bleeding edge. So I think it's an ever-evolving process. And then we have key moments in our kind of overall development cycle where we really take a stop. We're actually about to go in it now, where we'll go into planning for 2025. And we have like several days of sort of just full insight sessions and pulling in experts. And we use that not just to talk about that year, but I think it's a great moment to really have some in-depth conversations where we turn off the rest of the meetings, because I think it's so hard to have those kind of deeper strategy conversations when you're in back-to-back Zooms or meetings or whatever. So creating a window for that, I think, is really critical every year.
And what do you see in the future would be the biggest kind of challenges and trends that you will face in marketing?
Yeah, listen, I think in my industry specifically, I think there's a couple of things. I think our continued balance between third-party and brick-and-mortar retail and e-commerce and our direct business is an interesting tension point in our business that I'm sure other businesses are facing. And I think retail, just as a category and where that's going in the dynamics of everything that we've just come off of and some of the challenges that we've just gone through coming out of 2022. I think that's a key one for sure. And then I think the continued challenge I have on Barbie is just, it's a little bit of it's another prioritization comment. I think there's these opportunities to go into so many different things, and you talk about metaverse and NFTs and all of these different places and spaces that the brand can extend. I think for us, it's a lot about how do we create the right focus and ensure that we're doing a few things really great. Because especially at a time where your brand is really hot, everybody's coming to you. Everybody. All those people that wouldn't talk to you 2 years ago, they want to talk to you.
It's Margot. It's Margot Robbie.
I mean, yes, who wouldn't? But I think that's a challenge for Barbie specifically right now, and one that I think we're still working through, how to make sure that we're maximizing the opportunity and taking full advantage while also making sure we don't get lost. Yeah.
And another thing that I know that is close to your heart from the conversations we've had is leadership and making sure that there's some key things that are really close and important to you from a leadership perspective, and I know that your team are currently seeing that in terms of feeling supported, feeling like they can have any conversation, and that actually that testing and learning and coming up with an idea, any ideation, isn't just thrown out, and they can feel safe to actually bring that up.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the type of things that you do to foster that, and some kind of techniques and tips that everyone might find useful to be able to make sure they manage in a really successful way. These
are the moments where I'm like, I'm going to get braggy about my team. But I mean, first of all, I have faith in my team, and I love my team, and I think we've made really good hires, and I've strategically gone after people across the organization to get them into my team. So I think it starts with making sure you feel like you've got good people, because then naturally you're going to empower them, you're going to trust them, all of those things. I mean, listen, I think the pandemic was a challenging time for everybody, but a challenging time to be a manager. And I think, I do applaud my company for, I think they did a really good job of ensuring that all of their people leaders were being extremely empathetic and leading with empathy, leading with flexibility, leading with all of that, which I think was a unique time. But I think in terms of day-to-day, I get some very strong scores on my employee engagement survey around, I think, setting an environment that is not hierarchical, that ideas come from anywhere, that they feel like they can bring themselves to work. Like, those are all really, really important things to me because they were important to me when I was at their place. And you can't do your best work if you can't bring yourself full self to the office. I think it's creating time and space for people to actually get to know each other, for them to share things about themselves. But then I think it's also not just how you behave when you're just with your team, but how do you behave with your team when you're around others? How do you look to them first? How do you show them off? How do you ensure they're set up for success in every environment you're going into? I think is a key part of what I think about is I'm always thinking about how can I put them in positions to walk out with a win whenever we're with particularly key leaders across the organization, but even with their own peers. We're a very matrixed organization, and roles and responsibilities can get blurry, and part of my team's job is to keep the train on the tracks and pull it all together. So ensuring that people are looking at them in that way is a key part of making sure that the whole thing works. So anyway.
No, I agree. I think making sure that everyone feels super supported. I've got some team over here, so hopefully they do feel the same way. But so just a few, I guess, I don't know how we're doing for time, but is there anyone in particular throughout your career that has really inspired you or that you look up to get you to the position that you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had some great bosses. I'm not going to butter this one up too much, but I mean, I've been very lucky to have really good bosses throughout my career that I think I've, taken something from each of them. I mean, I've had a couple of shitty bosses. Everyone has a shitty boss at some point, but and I think you learn something from that too, right? I think paying attention to what you're learning from your bosses, I think is a key part of it. But yeah, I mean, I think, this one taught me determination because I think he is someone who won't let go of something that he knows is right. I think one of our dear friends who was one of my bosses at some point, her name's Nithya, who also led the brand for a while, she led with an extreme compassion for her team that I strive to emulate, and I think is really powerful. And honestly, my first boss at Mattel, I had a previous career. I used to produce theater, a product line called Creatable World 3 years ago, which was the first ever gender-inclusive doll. It was one of Time's best inventions of the year, got a ton of attention, didn't work commercially. And I think we got so caught up in what we believed to be the power of what it was that we lost a little bit of sight on the actual commercial execution of the product, and some things that we knew would potentially hinder the product going out. And I think we were a little too pure in how we approached that. And I think if we hadn't done some of that, I think it would have had more of a running shot at succeeding. And that's probably the one that I would probably say that I regret a little bit. But I'm still very proud of what it was, and I think it'll have a life again at some point. It's just that one could have maybe worked out a little differently. Yeah.
You got time for one more?
Well, I haven't even been to I haven't stopped asking questions.
Go for it.
Does anyone have any questions for Nathan?
I'll jump in. I got one comment on the opposite of regrets.
Yeah.
I think it was a home run, the collaboration with Rocket Mortgage in the Super Bowl commercial. Just tell us, like, the level of fun on that was 1 to 10, like 12, or what?
It was ridiculously fun. And I'll tell you, it was completely not planned on our side. I mean, literally, Rocket came and pitched us, and it's one of those things where I think we had a strategy for several years of sort of turning Barbie into an influencer, right? Like, she has 11 million subscribers on her YouTube channel. We started a vlog back in 2015 and has millions of views, and she has an amazing Instagram channel called Barbie Style. If you don't follow it, you should. And it's her doll self living this amazing doll life, and we've had brands pay to integrate on that. Uggs did an integration, right? So I think we've been kind of putting this strategy out there to try to turn the character into an influencer in the same way that everyone else is out there these days. And this is where I think that strategy paid off. They literally came and pitched it to us with Barbie as talent. Right? They're like, she's going to star in this spot with Anna Kendrick. We're like, cool. Can it be about and they're like, we want it to be about the dream house. And we're like, great, because we have a whole dream house campaign going on. So it was one of those kind of amazingly perfect moments where somebody comes to you with something that you're like, yeah. And I don't know if you wouldn't realize this, but we do not have Super Bowl money. So this was the first Super Bowl spot for Barbie ever. So a really cool thing. I've gotten to do a variety of firsts on the brand in my time, but it was a pretty cool one. And obviously having Anna Kendrick and all of that, I mean, it was awesome. And they were really great partners on, again, it was almost a good entree into the conversations around the movie in some ways, because it was a very broad audience. It's obviously more adult targeted, and they wanted to push in places and spaces with humor and all of that kind of stuff that was a good kind of testing ground for that. But yeah, it was super fun.
What results have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the noise and attention and relevance and all of that from a digital metrics perspective was extremely strong, and just the amount of obviously social volume and all of that kind of stuff during the period was amazing. And we saw some corresponding lifts as well in the business, which was positive. And I think we also saw that some additional conversations came out of that, right, again. So particularly on the licensing side, which again is where we see the biggest opportunity. We have almost, not that I would say we've tapped out toy, but we've been the number one in the industry for the last couple of years. So at some point it becomes, how big can you get within your own industry? So for us, we're really focused on how can we expand into those other sort of categories and licensed places and things like apparel and gaming and all of that kind of stuff. So, those kinds of moments create more proof points around what the brand can do and how it can operate in those spaces. Yeah.
Does anyone else have some questions?
We got one question. Time. You're good. We got time for one. You raise your hand first.
Oh, wow. I'm actually curious about the conversation you had with the Wachitsky sisters. And so you said that you kind of had the conversation around, like, what does it take to raise 3 amazing young women like that? What did they say?
Totally. I loved it because I got to sit and just like ask Anne questions at this dinner, and I just like totally like peppered her. It was also fun because they grew up on the Stanford campus. Their dad was this astrophysics professor or something insane like that. And I went to Stanford undergrad, so we were also commiserating about all of that. But hearing her talk about she grew up around professors. Everyone was brilliant, and everyone was having all of these conversations. And she said, you were told there was never a reason that you should be bored. There's always something to be exploring or asking questions about or whatever. And I think there was one just like this level of curiosity and expectation around at all times, that there's all these interesting conversations to have around infinite topics, right? And then she did also say there was a bit of a resilience factor as well, in the sense of like, you know, they were going into hard sciences and around a lot of science professors, and, you know, that could be harsh, and I think gave them a thick skin at a relatively young age, which I don't know if that's necessarily the thing you want to take away, but I did think just sort of this level of environmental sort of curiosity and rigor and all of that stuff I thought was interesting as a takeaway. And they have an amazing mother who also has sort of an awesome story too. So we're talking about maybe we could work with her. Anyway, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. This
Yeah,
has been
awesome.
fantastic.
Thank you guys.